Welcome to the Coastal Gardener, our last show for the year. We've had a great year here at the Arboretum. Hope you've enjoyed following along with some of the things that we've done this year on the grounds. We'll have a little recap toward the end of the show. But one of the fun things we get to do here as part of the Arboretum and the Display Garden is introduce really cool plants that you might want to add to your garden. And the guy who's best at doing that is Mark Weekly. He's our Arboretum coordinator, and he has a lot to do with the displays that you see here in the garden. Mark, welcome to the show. And we're standing here with a salvia that is really pretty darn unique. So tell us a little bit about it and how you might grow it.
Well, this is a Mexican sage, a Salvia mexicana. This particular version is called Limelight, as you can tell from the lime green with the bright purple coming from it. It's native to central Mexico. It likes full sun, but it'll take some shade like this one's in. It keeps it a little lower and a little more spread out. Otherwise, in a full sun location, it can get 6 foot by 6 foot.
And you can see this one, as you were talking off camera, this one is wasn't in the garden until August here, is that correct? So it's grown, it's what, 4 feet already with a similar spread. So I would expect that 6 by 6 is probably reasonable. Salvias are generally pretty easy to grow, aren't they? This one, I guess, as you mentioned, the Limelight, of course, call that because of the color. But tell us a little bit about how you might incorporate Salvia Limelight into a garden.
Well, this would be a beautiful plant to play off of orange flowers. Anytime you can get this intense neon color contrast would be a good place for it. It's just such a unique combination that you can't help but have it as a focal point. I mean, there's no way to blend this guy into a landscape because he's going to jump out as soon as September rolls.
So you don't need 300 of them, but a few in the right spot is a good way to go. One of the things that a lot of people in southeastern North Carolina have problems with, of course, are deer and some of the other critters that eat their plants. What would you expect with Limelight Salvia?
This one should be fairly deer resistant. It doesn't have the real strong potent smell that a lot of salvias do, but it does have the really fuzzy leaves, and they tend to stay away from eating paper towels.
Yeah, obviously we don't have deer here at the Arboretum, so we don't really have a place to test it, but I know the question that most people are going to be asking out there, Mark, is it's obviously a late season plant, blooming probably, as you mentioned, probably starting in September typically. Are we in a position that we can find this plant? And if we are, or even if we aren't, is it going to survive here?
Well, that's what I'm hoping to find out this year. From everything I've read on it, it's hardy to 20 degrees. In most places it stays semi-evergreen, but a really hard frost will probably take it back to the ground. But the mild winters that we have, this should come back gangbusters next year.
So it's going to be typically, we think, is going to be pretty much a typical herbaceous perennial. The frost will take it down, we just cut it off, and then it'll reemerge in the spring. But of course, being a late bloomer, you're not going to see blooms on this until late summer. Right?
It's a good choice for a fall pollinator for the butterfly garden. The bees obviously love it, wasps.
Yeah, you can see a lot of bees working these flowers here late in the season, and be a great kind of bridger for pollen for the bees. I know the mahonias are just beginning to pop some of those, so that's always a good wintertime source. But Limelight Salvia looks like it's a winner so far. But that's one of the fun things, like as I said, we get to do is to test these out. This plant will probably not too far in the distant future deal with the cold, so it's not going to look like this much longer. But it's over in the picnic area, the new picnic area, the display garden here at the Arboretum. So come and check it out very quickly if you want to see it. If not, come back next spring and watch it as it develops going into next summer. Well, Mark, a beautiful plant. We'll look forward to seeing how it self-sows. You mentioned it might possibly do that, and how it regrows into the garden next spring and summer.
Sounds good.
That's Mark Weekly, our Arboretum coordinator here. You know, you probably don't think too much about it this late in the season, but this is the perfect time to do spring flowering bulbs like daffodils, and as annuals, tulips, and some others. So let's go take a look at some of those and some planting times that are coming up shortly. Here we are talking a little about spring flowering bulbs, and when we talk about spring flowering bulbs, the ones that probably most people know, tulips that we can't grow as anything other than annuals here in southeastern North Carolina, daffodils, jonquils, narcissus, that whole group work very well. Hyacinths, anemones, some of the other plants that you see sold in catalogs, probably not all that reliable here as an outdoor plant. Might work in a container like this. But if you want something reliable in the way of spring flowering bulbs that are going to come back year after year, stick with the narcissus genus, the jonquils, the daffodils. They are usually pretty darn reliable, and they have a toxic chemical in them that keeps things like voles and other varmints from bothering them, which tulips often have a problem with. So stick with the narcissus if you want something that comes back year to year. If you're just looking for a pop of color in spring or late winter, this is a great way to do it right here. Like we have this container, we're going to put violas and snapdragons in it for winter color. And you can see I've excavated out the container. This is just typical potting media like we'd use to plant any other plant. And what I've done is excavated it out to about 6 inches below the final grade. One thing about planting bulbs, a lot of people will ask you about, well, you know, they see these depths and they say, well, I don't know how deep to plant it. It's just like planting a seed that you plant based on how large the bulb is. This would be considered somewhat a small to medium-sized bulb, and you want to plant this tulip about 4 to 6 inches with this sitting 4 to 6 inches deep, not the top be 6 inches deep, the bottom. So that's a fairly good range. If you have some really large narcissus or daffodils, you might even go to 8 inches on those. But somewhere between 4 and 8 inches is going to be the right depth for most of the bulbs we use here as spring flowers. The other thing people think about or hear about is how to buy them. Just some common sense kind of stuff. Make sure the bulbs are firm. You don't want anything that's real lightweight and going away or rotting. Make sure they have good color. You can see how nice and firm this tulip is. The nice creamy colors, not a lot of browns. Again, just common sense kind of stuff. And right now is a good time to go ahead and buy them, even if you're not ready to plant. The ideal time to plant here in southeastern North Carolina, if you want to be scientific, you want the soil temperatures to be about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That usually means sometime around Thanksgiving or the first week of December as ideals. But you can plant on into January and still have pretty good success with them. But the sooner you plant, once that temperature hits 60 degrees Fahrenheit soil temperature, the better you'll be. Another thing you hear about with spring flowering bulbs is about fertilizer. Now you look at this and you say, that says rose fertilizer. And the point of that is this is a slow release product. It's a kind of a balanced product, 11-6-11, and that's fine. You can buy special bulb booster fertilizers. They're usually something like 996 or something similar. The point of it is slow release nitrogen, a pretty good shot of phosphorus, the middle number, and a little bit of potassium to keep things going. And this fertilizer that's formulated for roses meets those requirements, works very well. So you don't have to use the bulb booster fertilizers. Just get something with a good shot of all three, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and make sure it has some slow release nitrogen, and your bulbs will do just fine. You can add the fertilizer now at planting, and you won't have to worry about fertilizer anymore. So let's go ahead and see if we can get these tulips set in this container. As I said, we're going to set 6 or 8 of these bulbs about 4 to 5 inches apart, about 6 inches deep. And you see we're planting them with the wide base toward the bottom. Kind of firm those in and space them out, and what will happen, of course, we'll come back in, add some soil to that. Firm this up really well. You're going to have to add a little bit more. But the good thing about this is when you get it planted, you'll have the color from the violas and the snapdragons throughout the wintertime. You can do it with pansies. You can do it with some of the other English daisies, things like that that you might want to add. So once you've got this soil firmed in and get the others planted, you'll have that nice pop of color coming through that for a whole different season there in late winter, early spring. So we're going to add a little bit of fertilizer, mix that in. This will keep things going for us throughout most of the season. If you want to add a little soluble fertilizer in your watering, you can always do that to give them a little bit of force them along a little bit and give them a little shot in the arm. But I'm going to go ahead and grab those violas and snapdragons and finish up this nice little wintertime container. You see the last step here, of course, with this little container is to get some water on it to settle out the air pockets and make sure those roots have a chance to really get growing and really looking good for us. This is a fairly simple planting. You know, we use the tulips underneath. That'll give us that little pop of color later. We have the snapdragon to give us a little bit of height and some color there, and then the violas that'll kind of fill in and spill out around the container. So easy to do, not very expensive, and as you can see, pretty quick. So you have winter color along with a little pop there from the tulips later on. So doing the spring flowering bulbs, whether you use those like the daffodils that will perennialize or you use these like annuals, hyacinths, tulips, all of those, it's still a pretty easy, relatively inexpensive way to get a lot of color in the landscape, especially in the wintertime and early spring when there's not a lot going on. We think about this time of year, a lot of things are slowing down. You're not mowing as much, you're not doing a lot in the garden. But there are some things that you should really consider. Once most of the leaves have fallen, remulching your beds becomes a job that really needs to be done. And a lot of people ask, what's the best mulch? Is it better to use hardwood, pine straw? What works and what doesn't here? Bottom line is, it depends. So we're going to take you out and show you some bag and some bulk mulch and talk about the times to use each type.
There's an obesity problem in America, and 4-H members in North Carolina are doing something about it. They're using GIS mapping to help people find healthy food options in their community. But theirs is just one story. There are thousands of others. That's what makes it a revolution.
I'm Onijah, and I inspire people to make better decisions.
Join the revolution of Vivian.
The revolution of Trent.
We are the revolution.
Join the revolution of responsibility.
Welcome back to the show. You know, this time of year, the leaves have pretty much fallen on most of the trees. The pine needles are largely down, and that means it's a good time to add some new mulch to the garden. And most of us know why we do mulching, but lots of it is just to block light to the soil so you don't get as many weeds germinating. Some of it is to hold moisture and control temperature. Good reasons to mulch, but one caveat to that, make sure you don't use too much. This is a good example of one of those things where a little bit is good, but a whole lot's not better. A couple of 3 inches of mulch is all you really need, and if you've got very thick mulch and you're adding new to make it look fresh, you might want to pull some of that older stuff out, add it to the compost pile, work it into the soil somewhere, and add the new fresh mulch so it'll be nice and attractive. When it comes to choosing a mulch for your garden, a lot of it boils down to what you like, just the pure aesthetics of it. But there are lots of options out there, so let's go take a look at some of what you've got right here in the local area. When it comes to mulches, you do have a lot of great choices. One thing about it though, wherever you live in the country, the mulches are going to be slightly different. One thing about these kind of products, some of them are heavy if you're talking about some of the stone products, a lot of them are bulky and fairly expensive to haul, so you're always going to have to use relatively locally available products. So that's why we end up with a lot of things like pine straw or needles, the hardwood mulches, the pine bark based products, because they're readily available here in the area. And you'll find that to be the case wherever you go. One of the products that is used a lot here Then the large pile behind me here, the brown pile, that is a shredded hardwood product. And as the name would imply, it does come from hardwood trees. It's a nice mulch, it looks good, it keeps its color reasonably well. The only thing about the hardwood mulch is near the coast we have a lot of high pH water and high pH soils. Anything that comes from hardwood mulch is going to have a lot of calcium in it and tend to raise the pH over time. So if you're already dealing with pHs that are a little too high, you might want to stay away from the hardwood product just because it's going to aggravate that problem. Again, taking the soil samples, water samples, be a good idea to make sure you have that issue. When you move away from hardwood products, you come to largely pine bark based products, and there are a lot of different ones of those based on usually particle size. You start out with things like the very large pine bark nuggets, what they call mini nuggets, which are hammered to a smaller size, and down to a real fine product, which in my opinion is usually a better soil amendment, especially in high pH soils, than it is a mulch because it breaks down so readily. So lots of options on pine bark, and that makes a good product, especially, like I said, where you've got those high pH soils, high pH water. When you start looking at some of the others, once you move away from hardwood mulch and the pine bark based products, you get to things like you see these play cushion products that are a lot of times done with cypress. These are hammered so they don't have a lot of sharp edges, so if you have a kid's playground or a swing set, it's a good thing to put under it so the kids won't have problems getting stuck by the mulch if they happen to fall. The other large group of mulches that you'll see, like this black that's here to my right, are dyed products. These actually are mixed with a dye. It's a food starch based product, so it's not going to create any problems for you in the landscape. But they're black, they're red, they're browns, there's a lot of different colors out there. These are great products. They're usually based on hardwood, so they have those same issues with pH, but they do retain their color very well. And you can buy these bulk and in bags. You will pay a little bit more for them because they are dyed and they take a little bit of extra work. But if you really like the bright color and you want something that's going to last a little bit longer, then the dyed products, whatever color works for you, are great products. Now at the Arboretum, we've used a lot of what they call forest brown, and we've stopped using that because we have the same issues that a lot of you do with high pH. So we're using the pine bark based products now to try to help drive that pH down a little bit. It's not going to move it quickly and completely, but it certainly helps, and it doesn't aggravate it like some of the dyed products or some of the hardwood products would. The last one I wanted to show you before we go over and look at some of the stone and some of the bags is the cypress product. Cypress makes a great mulch. It's a real nice color. It makes real good contrast. This is a great product if you're on slopes because it tends to lock. It's a shredded material, so it won't float out of the beds. So whatever you're using, that's what it boils down to. What you like, what fits, do you have the high pH problem? It's what's going to drive most of your decisions about which mulch to use. Well, everything we've been talking about so far are bulk products. You're going to have them hauled with a dump truck or a trailer. And you may not have that, and you may not want to deal with all those hassles. You can buy a lot of mulch products in bags, 2-3 cubic foot bags. You're going to pay a little more per cubic yard for those, obviously. You've got the cost of bagging it, but much more convenient for a lot of people. So let's go take a look at some of the bag products that are available. When it comes to bag mulches, you have almost the same choices you do in the bulk products. You see we have pine bark nuggets here, the mini pine bark nuggets, all of the dyed products, the cypress mulch. So not a lot of difference in the choices for bagged or bulk products, but as I mentioned to you, this is going to be something that's a little more convenient. If you just need a small amount, this is certainly the way to go. You don't have all the trucks to haul it. But the same basic product, and different companies have slightly different products, but they're all going to be somewhat the same, the dyed, the pine bark based stuff, or the hardwood or cypress. Another one we haven't really talked about so far are the stone mulches. And some people do use stone mulch, especially in places where there's concern about fire hazards near the house. Lava rock, river stone, some of the larger stones probably have an application, but generally they're not going to give you the benefits that the organic mulches do. And if you have plants that don't really like high soil temperatures, you're not going to get that moderation of soil temperature with the stone mulches like you'll get with the organic products. So if you're doing a xeriscape garden or something with a lot of succulents and cacti, maybe it fits. If you're doing something somewhere where there's fire hazard, the stone may work. But for most of us, we're probably going to stick with the organic mulches. Now, one we haven't talked about either that is organic, that's very popular, of course, because we have lots of pine trees, is pine straw or pine needles. Let's go show you a couple of options on those. If you're from the South, you probably call this pine straw. Other parts of the country, you may call it pine needles, the same thing. But it's popular here because we have a lot of pine trees, relatively inexpensive product. Because it is baled, it's a little easier to handle to get in and out of places. You don't have to have wheelbarrows and all of that to do that. But a couple of different kinds of pine straw that are typically available here in the area. One would be longleaf pine straw like this. Obviously, this is coming from the longleaf pines that grow close to the coast. This is really a little higher quality mulch than the shortleaf or slash pine that you often see sold. So if you buy the longleaf straw, you're going to pay a little bit more for it, but it's going to last a little bit longer, maybe retain its color a little better. Nothing wrong with the slash or short needled pine straw as far as how it does as a mulch and works, but it's probably not going to last quite as long, and you're going to pay a little bit less for it. One thing you may have heard about pine straw, pine needles, is that they can create some fire hazards, especially in places where you don't have good fire protection or available water. It's not something to be terribly worried about in most cases, but it is something to keep in mind if you're in those kind of situations. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the mulches that are available here in southeastern North Carolina. If you have high pH soils and water, you may want to stay away from the hardwood and the dyed products, but otherwise it boils down to just what you like the looks of. After the break, we're going to take a look back at 2013, especially some of the projects we've completed at the Arboretum.
We've got an obesity problem in our area, so we're trying to use the technology that we have to change that.
In North Carolina, 4-H members are using GIS mapping technology to locate healthier eating options.
Health in Action came to us so that we could conduct that GIS project for them.
This 4-H movement has helped the entire community and is changing their lives for the better.
The community is made up of the people who live in it, so if no one takes responsibility, then nothing's going to get done.
I guess we've helped people make better decisions when it comes to eating healthy.
My name's Trent, and I use mapping to make a difference in my community.
I'm Onijah, and I inspire people to make better decisions.
Join the revolution of Vivian.
The revolution of Trent.
We are the revolution.
4-H. Join the revolution of responsibility. Learn more at 4-H.org.
Welcome back to the show. Hope you got a little bit more understanding of where the right mulches might help you in your own garden. You know, we're winding down on 2013. It's been a great year here at the Arboretum and the Display Garden. I wanted to kind of give you a recap of some of the things we've accomplished this year and something you might want to come and see here. We started out with what we're calling the Woodland Garden. This was the wooded area that was kind of to the east of the main wedding lawn where we have most of our events and where we put up a lot of tents. The first thing we did is remove a couple of trees and enlarge the wedding lawn space. That allowed us to put larger tents, and that's certainly made a big difference in some of our events like Art and Arboretum. We worked on that garden. We're going to have hydrangeas, a lot of companion plantings to that in that kind of dappled shade. So coming next May and early June, you'll see a lot of new hydrangeas in that area. With some help from the Tidewater Camellia Club and the Cape Fear Garden Club, we're adding more camellias to the camellia walk. About 45 will be added over the winter. And as the camellias come in, you'll have a great little walk there from fall on into early spring with a lot of different varieties and a lot of different types showing color there. We added some new lawn space there with this crown zoysia sod, if you remember. And that again is another space to help us with Art in the Arboretum with events like that, with tent space for other events. So all in all trying to make the place a little more user-friendly and usable for all of us and you guys in the public. Probably the space that's been most talked about as far as the people who just come here to the Arboretum and the garden casually is where I'm sitting now in the picnic area. This used to be just a wooded area that was kind of left for things to be, you know how it is, if it's a space that's not being used, things get left there. We had an old shade structure that was used just to hold plants in the past. We converted that to a picnic table, put a new roof on that, and we added these circular paver pads and these circular picnic tables with the colorful umbrellas, the nice St. Augustine turf. So this area has really become a great spot for people to have a little picnic, come and eat lunch when the weather is good, bring the kids out for a birthday party. We've added a charcoal grill. We have the slap drum that you can bring the kids out and play, and we're adding some water fountains and some other things. So this space has really become a nice, usable, very attractive space, and some really neat plantings here too, adding a lot of things, adding some of the cultivars of red bud, lots of different perennials. So a really neat space to come and enjoy, and whether you like the plants or it's just that you want to bring the kids out. The last place that we really worked hard on this year was our Bradley Street entrance. We've been working on trying to get that entrance done for a number of years. We finally got the paving and the concrete done in the spring. And this was an area that really wasn't very attractive. It was just, if you remember, just a kind of a space that was left that had a few southern magnolias on it and not much else. So now we've added berms, added some significant new plantings, a stone walkway, and we've created all these nice turf areas that look good and also serve as overflow parking for us during events like the Master Gardener Plant Sale in the spring and Art in the Arboretum in the fall. So those are our major accomplishments in the garden this year. I hope you'll come out and see those and enjoy them and see them as they develop. We'll continue improving the garden here, and hey, you can't beat the price. It's free. Thanks for joining us here on the Coastal Gardener all through the year. I hope you have a great holiday season. We'll look forward to joining you again in 2014.